Shows Joe King standing on stage who says, "It's been 115 days since the last Joe King show. Did you miss me?" The crowd tepidly applauds. King: "Very good. Now, I'm the producer of the #1 audio-only sketch comedy show on the video platform YouTube featuring an all-dead cast, Saturday Night Alive. But while the writers were on strike for much of 2023, I created this show, The Joe King Show, to keep the content going while my Saturday Night Alive cast refused to work in solidarity with the strikers. I discontinued this program once the writer's strike ended, but I'm bringing it back today to hopefully help right a wrong that occurred recently. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, and on January 12th, the Chicago Bulls organization held during halftime of its game a special Ring of Honor ceremony to commemorate the greats in its organization's history. And while it was mostly a wonderful event, the ceremony was somewhat marred by the fans' booing of the late Jerry Krause. Krause was the general manager of the Bulls from 1985 to 2003 and was part of the organization when it won its 6 championships. And since this program specializes in interviewing the deceased, I thought it would be a great idea to bring Jerry on to defend his legacy." King exits the stage, enters another stage, sits at a seat behind a desk and says, "Please welcome to the program, Jerry Krause." Krause emerges behind a curtain and waves to the audience. Applause, applause, applause. Krause walks over and takes a seat next to King's desk. King: "Welcome to the show, Jerry." Krause: "Thank you for having me. I guess this isn't a Chicago audience, huh?" King: "Now we're going to get to that. As you watched the Bulls' recent Ring of Honor ceremony, what did you think when your name was booed?" Krause: "Well, believe it or not, I didn't take it personally. Honestly, I think the Chicago sports media never painted me in the greatest light, and that had an effect on how the fans perceived me. I just wish my wife, Thelma, didn't have to endure the booing." King: "Now, before we get into your career a bit, why was the media tough on you?" Krause: "Well, I was tough on them. I never thought it was in the best interest of the team for the media to know what we were thinking or planning, so I was sort of contentious with them throughout my time as general manager of the Chicago Bulls." King: "Now, you were from Chicago originally, played baseball as a catcher in high school at Taft, and attended Bradley University, and after college became a basketball scout and then also a baseball scout." Krause: "Yeah, I scouted for the then Baltimore Bullets, Phoenix Suns, Philadelphia 76ers, Los Angeles Lakers, and the Bulls. And in baseball, I scouted for the Cleveland Indians, Oakland Athletics, Seattle Mariners, and then the White Sox. I really loved scouting and had an intense passion for it." King: "You then, in 1985, became the general manager of the Chicago Bulls and inherited the greatest player of all time, then reigning Rookie of the Year, Michael Jordan." Krause: "Yeah, I was lucky to start in such a great position, but at the same time, it was pretty much Michael and nothing else of value at the time. I knew I had my work cut out for me to make it a championship team, especially considering that the prevailing wisdom at the time was that you really needed a franchise center to win a championship, and would have trouble winning with a 2-guard as your best player." King: "Now, your first hire was bringing in a personal friend of yours and another member of the Bulls' Ring of Honor, assistant coach Tex Winter." Krause: "Yes, I was a big fan of Tex's triangle offense, which he learned as a player at USC and later used successfully coaching at Kansas State. I thought that having a unique offense like that would mitigate our lack of a franchise center." King: "Now, you eventually fired Coach Stan Albeck after the 1986 season and brought in Doug Collins as head coach, and later Phil Jackson as an assistant coach." Krause: "Doug was a great coach. I loved him as a player, not necessarily for his skill, but for his passion and tenacity, and he definitely brought that with him as head coach. And Phil was someone who I've been following since I was a scout. I unsuccessfully tried to get the Bullets to draft him in 1967, but I stayed in touch with him as a player and then as a CBA coach in the 70s and 80s, and brought him in on Doug's staff." King: "Now, your first draft, you drafted Brad Sellers at #9, who turned out to be a bit of a bust, but you really put the Bulls on a championship track with the 1987 draft, trading #8 pick Olden Polynice for #5 pick Scottie Pippen and drafting Horace Grant at #10. Krause: "I wanted to create a great defensive team. Michael was a great defender, but we needed more. I was very enamored with Scotty. He was 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan, and I projected him to be an outstanding perimeter defender, which he was. And Horace, really the same thing. I projected him to be a great defender and rebounder, and he absolutely was. Okay. Now, in the 88 and 89 season, Scotty and Horace started to come around. You won 50 and 47 games, respectively, but in both those years lost to the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs. Krause. The Pistons of that era are one of the most underrated teams of all time. Maybe not the bad boy stuff, but as far as their defensive prowess, they were a team we were trying to emulate. Okay. You then fired Doug Collins and made Phil Jackson the head coach. Am I wrong in thinking that you eventually would have won with Collins if you didn't fire him? Krause. I guess we'll never know, but the biggest thing for me was that Doug was not allowing the team to run the triangle, and I knew that Phil was going to run it. And I thought that that was the extra spark we needed to go from a good team to a championship team. Okay. You also traded Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright. Couldn't you have still won with Oakley instead of Cartwright? Krause. No. Neither Horace nor Oakley were quite big enough to consistently defend against elite centers, and we needed someone who could. Oakley was a great player, but Horace's emergence made him expendable, and we needed a man in the middle to defend elite centers, and Cartwright provided us that. Okay. Now, by 1991, you had John Paxson, MJ, Pippen, Grant, and Cartwright with a pretty good bench, including B.J. Armstrong, and you broke through and won the 1991 NBA championship. Krause. It was amazing. We were a great defensive team, and the guys, including Michael, bought into the triangle offense, and were very tough to beat. All the championships were special, but it's difficult to have a better feeling than winning your first one. Okay. After that first title, the book The Jordan Rules came out and showed the world that Michael Jordan hated you. Why did he hate you? Krause. Well, a lot's been made about me traveling with the team, and that Michael didn't like that, but I think it gave me an advantage on knowing the temperature of the team day to day. Michael also didn't like that I traded away Oakley, who was his very close friend, and that I didn't bring in certain players he wanted. Okay. And how about when you said players and coaches don't win championships, organizations win championships? Krause. What I actually said was players and coaches alone don't win championships. Organizations win championships. But that may have played a part as well. Okay. Anyway, you won 2 more titles in 92 and 93, and then Jordan retired. Krause. Right. I was motivated to prove we could still be a championship team, and the 94 team, even though it didn't win the championship, I was very proud of how Pippen and the rest of the team played. Okay. But after 94, the team turned over. Krause. We no longer had Cartwright, Paxson, Grant, Stacey King, Scott Williams, but kept Pippen and built around him with Tony Kukoc, who was one of my better draft picks, Steve Kerr, Luke Longley, and Ron Harper. Okay, and then Jordan came back. Krause. I always felt that he would and that he just needed a break, but that 95 team didn't have enough rebounding to compete with the Orlando Magic. Okay, so after 95, you made one of the greatest trades ever, trading Wilt Perdue for Dennis Rodman. Krause. Dennis was the perfect piece that that team needed and gave us much-needed rebounding. And with Harper, Jordan, and Pippen, it gave us 4 elite defenders in our starting lineup. Okay. You then went on to win 3 more titles from 96 through 98, including a 72-10 season in 96. But the 98 season was somewhat marred by the contentiousness with Phil Jackson. Krause. I worked for Jerry Reinsdorf at the end of the day, and he made it clear he wasn't going to pay Phil to be the highest paid coach in the league. So I could have been better about what I said to the media about the situation, but it was clear to everyone that that was going to be Phil's last season with the team. Okay. The dynasty then broke up, and you received a lot of blame for that, but ultimately you won 6 titles, drafted Pippen, Grant, Armstrong, and Kukoc, hired Phil Jackson to be the head coach, and traded for Dennis Rodman. And those moves ultimately got you into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Krause. That was a great honor that I'm very proud of, yes. But nothing makes me more proud than that we won 6 championships for the city of Chicago. Okay. Thanks for sitting down with me, Jerry. And again, on behalf of the city of Chicago, I apologize that you were booed at the Ring of Honor. Krause. Thank you for having me. Okay. Jerry Krause, everybody. Applause, applause, applause. Okay. That's all the time we have for this episode, but tune into the next one where we'll interview another deceased guest. Until then, I'm Joe King.